Albania is not for beginners. One of the cheapest countries in Europe. The wind is blowing from the sea, sometimes a bit crazy. It was the malt. It was lovely. Hello, let's talk about Albania today. I came to Albania as a tourist, then as a digital nomad, and then started evaluating, is it really possible to live there? After living in cities like Tirana, Durres, Vlora and Sarandë, I have realized that living for real is more complicated than just having a vacation, and I will share what I found out. Albania is interesting because this is one of the cheapest countries in Europe, and at the same time they have the infamous Mediterranean climate, and you will feel safe. It is beautiful, warm, but also chaotic and unpredictable at times. Albania is not for beginners. It's like an unshaved poet on a rusty fishing boat with a cigarette in his teeth, who somehow is still very charming, like a today's narrator. Up to 3 million people live in Albania. They speak a very unique language, which is not like any other language in the world, because all other tribes that shared the same language family became extinct many centuries ago, and only Albanians were able to survive and preserve their language and culture in this enclosed area which was protected by the mountains. Muslim religion became dominant there after the 15th century, when Ottoman Empire established it, and about 20% of people are Christians. But many people are not very religious in Albania and do not follow any religious traditions. However, you can hear the sound of mosques in the cities, and there are beautiful mosques in Tirana. Also, you would see women wearing traditional Muslim garments. Not often, but some of them do, even on the beaches. So let's talk about the capital city of Tirana and for whom it would be the best for. Tirana is a big, vibrant city with a wonderful lake park. It has a lot of wide squares and interesting tourist locations. Most of Albanians who do not work in tourism live in Tirana, and because of this you can see how the real life looks. It has lovely cafes, mosques, cathedrals, wide squares, and all attributes of the big cities like shopping malls and so on. It has about 600,000 people and is one of the biggest cities on the Balkans. It is also one of the youngest capitals, founded in the 17th century. It is very dense and crowded. Life boils there and the traffic is chaotic. I loved Tirana because I was living there in December and the rainy November season was over. It was much warmer than in Poland from where I arrived. This warm weather and the green park, which looked more like the beginning of autumn, made tickles under my skin. I was so much impressed by the fact that the nature was still alive, while on the other side of the world it was already asleep until the next year. I simply spent the end of the daylight at one of the squares, sitting in front of the sunlit area, which was moving farther away. And I was missing sun so much after Poland that I kept walking farther along with the sun line to catch a bit more sun. It was lovely. Cheaper prices in local cafes were also like a gulp of fresh air after Poland. $2 latte in the Café Sophie was my everyday ritual there during the work. But the rainy season earlier in November wasn't easy, to be honest, especially because I was in the coastal city in Durrës back then. It was a good stress test because I could see the life during the rainy season. I could see the wind and the humidity, which made life there very unpleasant. That is why most of the people live in the capital, which is located more inside of the continent. The main issue wasn't the cold, windy weather, it was the mold inside of the apartments. I could feel it and it was making me sick. Leaving Durres and coming to Tirana Fixed this issue and I was feeling better the next day right away. The apartments by the shore are very cheap to rent during the winter, but this is because not many people want to live there because it's very cold and you only have the air conditioner as your only source of heating. The wind is blowing from the sea both in your windows and the doors because the technical area of the building often doesn't have the walls. It is very cold on the first shoreline. So many people would prefer to live in the capital and then they would buy a cheap apartment on the sea line and go there during the summer. But I have made a conclusion that Tirana is the best place to live all year round, full time. Durres is much older than Tirana. In old ancient Roman history, it was an important city from where the road to Constantinople started. Nowadays you can get from Tirana to Durres by following a very dense road which is developed from both sides, and Durres looks a little bit like a distant district of Tirana because the developments never stop. But of course it is a separate independent town, and its citizens are very proud of it. They have separate football teams, for example, which are rivals to teams in Tirana, and they stand its ground as the major port city. Many Albanians, when they go to the seaside, they go to Durrës and to nearest villages, so you will see a lot of local people there. Also people from Kosovo, I suppose, or Macedonia. So we saw a lot of Albanians on the beaches, some of them smoking and chilling. Sometimes a guy with a karaoke box would cross the beach and suggest his services to the people. Then occasionally a company of Albanians would order a traditional Albanian song and start dancing in a traditional Albanian style, which is very different from the Western disco style. Summer in Durres is so hot that you wouldn't like to live farther than the first or second line. There is only so much distance you can cover under the heat and sun before jumping under the protection of the umbrella and the breath of the sea. Sadly, I wouldn't call Durres cheap because it is also a tourist destination, even if mostly for locals. And Tirana wasn't cheap because it was a capital. Hard truth of the day, there are no very cheap places in Albania anymore unless somewhere in the middle of the country where you wouldn't go anyway. Some people will advise you to just find something cheaper on Facebook in local groups. In theory that could work if you want to spend hours trying to contact local people with broken Albanian. Maybe someone will appreciate your dedication and decide to give you a discount, but this rent is sometimes the only income which they rely on to live through the year, so I wouldn't plan the vacation around that. Durres and its surroundings are a bit cheaper, but the south of the country is more popular for its signature sea landscapes and places where mountains and the sea meet together. Also, the water appears cleaner on the southern coast. The most known destinations in that direction are Saranda and Vlora. Vlora is like a middle town with 100,000 people, and Saranda is more like a big village with 40,000. So Vlora is a compromise because it's still a bigger city, but it has very nice beaches and it has the mountains. There is a nice promenade and a well-maintained central street in Vlora. There is also a legendary St. Mary's monastery, which is a small monastery located near the lagoon, not far from the town. We were advised to visit the wild territories behind the lagoon because it is wild and there are no people. You can just enjoy yourself by the sea, but unfortunately we didn't have time to follow the advice. It would be a great idea to rent bicycles in Vlora and investigate the shoreline on a bicycle as well as the city center. We took a cycling trip to the monastery, but I wouldn't recommend that because it goes in some places through the industrial area, which is less developed, and also you will have to go directly on the road and big vehicles would pass, and it's not a pleasant experience on that short part of the route. Also, Vlora has nice hiking trails not far from the city, and I have a video on my channel where I am going through one of these routes, and I have a description of the route in the video description, so if you are interested in hiking, then this is a very good place to go. It is worth mentioning that the coastal road from Vlora to Saranda is one of the most beautiful roads in all Albania, and it has views on the city, on mountains, on the bay, and it's very beautiful. There are also attractions for tourists like boat tours to the island, to the caves, to the desolated beach, and I advise taking one of such trips. Overall, Vlora is a cool destination for digital nomads to live from April to October. During the winter it also becomes quite humid and windy. Local people for whom this is a hometown are used to the climate and adjust their life accordingly by closing businesses and moving everything from the seafront deeper to the town and villages. We managed to meet many people from Ukrainian community in Vlora and to play board games, so I can easily imagine myself living in Vlora, taking a walk by the sea every day, enjoying the sunset, going to outdoor trips, hiking, making real friends, socializing, just living a slow life there. The last region I can talk about from my personal experience is the very south of Albania. It's the area around Sarandë. First of all, a funny episode which describes the spirit of all things in Albania happened during our trip from Durres to Sarandë. We decided to take a bus from the bus station at the exit of the city instead of going back to the city center. But it turned out that buses which were going to Sarandë were not allowed to stop there, and we were advised to go and stand directly on the highway and hitchhike our bus from there. The highway which we needed was like a middle road which was divided from the pedestrian area by another road and a metal fence which we had to climb in order to get into the spot. This is where we met a lot of other people who were waiting for their buses. So it turned out this was a bus station everyone was aware of. So yes, Albania is sometimes a bit crazy. Things like this happen there. But this episode pushed us to take a random bus in our direction, and we ended up in a town called Gjirokaster. It is a mountain town which is not far from Saranda, and all tourist guides advise to visit it if you go to Saranda. So we just approached things from the opposite direction. It has a nice old city built into the hill, but the main attraction there was the 12th century castle of Gjirokaster, which brings the atmosphere of Game of Thrones and medieval fairy tales. It played a big role in resistance to the Ottoman Empire and was sieged for many months in the past. The views from the walls are out of this world because it is located on the mountain and you can see the entire valley. This is one of the biggest castles. It is actually the biggest castle in Albania, and in my opinion this is the must-see place when you go to that area. Then we took a bus to Saranda, and sometimes the Serpentine Pass would scare me by its epic trajectories, but the bus drivers were well aware of the route and safely took us to the final destination. The seafront of Saranda is a paradise and is absolutely the best place in Albania for sea vacations. It is also true for a small village called Ksamil next to the Saranda, which has famous beaches. The downside of this is that there are many tourists and I would rather go there during the off-season. Saranda has its own vibe, which is impossible to catch in other bigger cities in Albania. It is very safe and it feels like extreme relaxation. It is a cozy little world which is perfect at that very moment. I was working remotely there from the seafront apartment with the sea view in front of my desk. This motivated me a lot because at that moment I realized that I'm working to be able to afford this life, and it was 100% worth it. In Saranda there are two must-visit places aside from the nearest beaches. The first is a small Le Corbusier castle on the hill with the best views to the city bay. There is a restaurant, but it is worth visiting even if you don't want to reserve the restaurant, just to enjoy the views. One hint I can give here is it would be better to take a taxi because the serpentine uphill road to the castle is unexpectedly abrupt and may be dangerous for people who had never been there before. The second must-visit place is the ruins of an old Roman settlement called the Butrint. The complex is quite big and has a lot of Roman ruins, and it used to be a Roman colony where a lot of soldiers lived. And later it was overtaken by Vandals, other nomadic tribes, Ostrogoths and Slavic tribes. I talk more about how Slavs invaded the Balkans in one of my other videos. If you are interested in that, then check on the channel. But the point is that it was overtaken by barbarians and overtaken by the swamps and slowly disappeared from the maps. For the trip to Butrint, I advised renting a car, and because then you can stop at different viewpoints and enjoy the nature of the southern Albania there. Also, you could visit some wild beach or visit Ksamil on your way back from Butrint to Saranda. So Saranda is the best for vacationing, but not so good in my mind for year-round living, because it is small, many restaurants close during the winter. Also the same issue with humidity and winds, no central heating. Also, it is located a bit far from other Albanian cities. However, it is close to Greece. You can take a ferry to the Corfu island, or you can go for shopping to the mainland Greece, and local people are doing that as well. So a quick conclusion shows that Tirana is the best for year-round full-time living. Durres is the best for cheaper life, still by the sea. Vlora is like a compromise because it's not super small, it's still a bigger town, and the nature is wonderful there. There are mountains, there is the sea. And lastly, Saranda is the best for vacations. However, people who like smaller town would still like Saranda probably over Vlora. Vlora is quite crowded as well during the tourist season. So the final note from me is that there are more nice places in Albania which are worth visiting. Let's reserve that for future adventures. Albania is a place where every problem is compensated by mountains, sunsets, and $2 latte by the seaside. So what do you think? Should I move to Albania? For now, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.